Welcome to the Artistry and Life podcast, Navigating Towards Happiness. I'm your host, Ray, and with me I have life practitioner and coach, Marking. In today's episode, we're peeling back the layers of truth on social media and how it affects myself sometimes. And I don't want it, because it affects me sometimes, I don't want it to affect my kids. They're in their teenage years, and they're impressionable, right? For me, it's a practice, right? When you're seeing something and then you get jealous or envious of something that you see on social media or even just on TV, reality TV, or just whatever commercials. And you're like, oh God, I wish I could afford that. Or, you start getting down on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've practiced that because of my own personal improvement, self-improvement that I took years ago. And now I put that in practice. It still sneaks in once in a while, but I keep it at bay. But I know that kids are very impressionable with that stuff. So I have to be the adult in the room and kind of tell my kids, like, don't compare yourself to the Kardashians or any of the superstars in music or in TV or movies, because, they're doing what they're doing, right? And they make so much money in that. But if you're still in high school and you're not making that kind of money, then of course then you start to dream about that, right? I wish I had the kind of money that the Kardashians had, or the mansion that they live in, or the cars that they drive, or the designer bags, or, stuff that they wear.
So let's get clear on what it is that you think or what it is that you're trying to work through. So the concern is,
I work through it every day. I don't want to be jealous of anything,
mm-hmm,
envious of anybody.
mm-hmm,
I try to keep that at bay.
mm-hmm,
I don't want my ego kicking in, thinking I have to compete with other people or
mm-hmm,
compare myself with other people
mm-hmm,
to make myself feel better. Like a
mm-hmm,
brand new car would make me feel better. Yeah. But
mm-hmm,
can you afford it? That kind of thing, right? Some people they just go do it. And then
mm-hmm,
they're in so much debt.
mm-hmm,
And, kids don't realize that, especially if they're not working, they're
mm-hmm.
not paying any bills. They're not, they don't understand the nuances of living paycheck to paycheck, or, living wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it. And trying to protect my kids from
Mm-hmm.
feeling that way, because then that could actually bring you down a rabbit hole of depression. Like, they're better than me. I'll never be better than them.
Mm-hmm.
I always want my kids to feel like they could do well, whatever they do, right? And whatever choice they make.
Right. So the concern is about the kids.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's not about you.
More so about my kids, or kids in general.
Mm-hmm.
And, with me, I've been able to practice that type of, I don't know what you call it, jealousy and envy, or, whatever that feeling kicks in sometimes. I try to put it at bay. I've dealt with it before. Yeah.
You try to put it at bay, but it still comes up for you.
Oh, it once in a while, like if I'm in a competing mode,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh man,
Mm-hmm.
he won the golf tournament. I
Mm-hmm.
got to go play and win. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? That my ego kicks in there, like, oh, I could do that. And I'm not talking like major pro tournaments. I'm just talking like if he just plays a local tournament in the area, and I'm like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
could have joined that, and I could have won, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
So then the question becomes for me, is having more clarity on how it affects you, would that help to better inform your kids?
Well, I try to teach my kids what I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm still learning about life,
Mm-hmm.
and about competing with the Joneses or comparing yourself to others,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like if you're trying to compare yourself to, let's say, Elon Musk kids,
Mm-hmm.
who are, whether or not he leaves money to them or not, they live a privileged life. And who do you see on TV all the time and in social media? Elon Musk,
Mm-hmm.
and how wealthy he is, right? And you're like, for me, I'm an adult. I get that. He worked hard for it. He's smarter than me, or, he's intelligent, whatever. He's a genius. They call him a
Mm-hmm.
genius. Okay, he's a genius, and he's able to make the kind of money he made.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the richest people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you compare yourself to someone like that?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to go after it. If that's your dream to be the richest man in the world, then be prepared to work hard, you know,
Mhm.
lose some relationships in your life because
Mhm.
you're not focused on relationships. You're focused on making money.
Mhm.
The only relationships I think you're focused on is the relationships you make in business and not your personal life.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
You're just basically focused on your business and not
Mhm.
focused on your personal life. Something's going to break, right?
Mhm.
Either your family life or your business
Mhm.
breaks. You got to learn how to balance that.
Do you feel your kids are understanding that?
Yeah, I pretty much teach them, but I know that they watch social media all the time and I don't want to cut it off
Mhm.
because they're teenagers, right?
So, uh-huh.
You can't just
So
cut that off because then they'll do something else or they'll do it behind your back or, you know,
are there any indications that your kids are receiving that information in a certain way?
yeah, just little signs like, oh my God, look at this house or look what so and so got, you know, that
Hmm.
kind of thing, what they see on social media.
Hmm.
Like there's always a thing of like, and I don't know if they are comparing themselves with them, like because they watch a lot of YouTube videos and a
Hmm.
lot of these YouTube influencers make a lot of money.
Hmm.
They're like 19-year-old kids or 30-year-old, between 20 or even teenagers
Hmm.
up to, 35, 40 years old, and they're
Hmm.
making millions of dollars a year just
Hmm.
being on YouTube.
Have you had conversations with them about comparing
Oh yeah. I
themselves?
yeah. Whenever that comes up for me, I say, they gotta, if you want to do something like that, go for it. Right.
Hmm.
But you got to understand that they work hard to do that.
Hmm.
And this is, there's a lot of them, their egos are showing off, they're
Hmm.
showing off.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you start like, oh my God, I wish I had that, or I wish I had
Hmm.
this. It's like, look at that. You know what I mean? That
Hmm.
kind of talk. You
Hmm.
start hearing that kind of creep in, and I always try to keep them at bay. But I know they're, I'm not with them all the time. So I can't tell them not to watch something or don't compare yourself to somebody. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like, and I know us growing up as adults, we went through the same thing, but we didn't have social media.
Hmm.
So it wasn't in our face 24/7. We had TV and movies. Now they have every freaking social media that you could add to your phone
Hmm.
and watch everything. TikTok, YouTube,
Hmm.
Twitter,
Right.
everything.
Right.
So it's a different world when we were growing up.
Sure. It's a different world than we were growing up. And again, I'll ask, have in the information that you've shared with your kids about being aware of the comparisons and how that be advantageous or not advantageous, right? Or disadvantageous, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We probably go down and, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to sit them down. They don't want to listen to me 24/7 talk about this stuff. So as much as I can,
Mm-hmm.
I try to instill in them that, don't compare yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I know once they go away to college, it's a different story, right? They're not calling me every day. They're not with me every day. And I'm just trying to instill something in them that, won't bring them down the rabbit hole. Cause I've seen it where, you want to compare yourself to somebody or you care what people think about you. So you think that buying designer bags and designer shoes and fancy cars
Mm-hmm.
makes you feel good and makes you look
Mm-hmm.
like them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that feeling is you want to feel when you
Mm-hmm.
do those types of
Right.
things. And then in the background, you don't know that you
Mm-hmm.
got to spend a lot of money to
Mm-hmm.
look like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes people put themselves in hawk.
Mm-hmm.
They owe the credit card bills because, who discusses the interest on a credit card?
Mm-hmm.
Some credit card interests are 24%.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Right.
you're borrowing $1, you owe them $1.24.
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
Right. So if the concern is that you don't want your kids to that you want your kids to be aware of the dangers, the pitfalls of comparing yourself on social media with social media, right?
Yeah. Or
That's
just in with others in general.
comparing. Okay.
Yeah.
Comparing in general.
There are times when, you drive by a private school and you see the high schoolers driving the dad's
Mhm.
secondhand cars,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
the parents bought them a brand new car and they're driving what?
Right.
Teslas,
Right.
Mercedes Benz.
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
you see Maserati,
Right.
and they're the same age.
Right.
And then they're looking at you like, how come I don't have a Maserati? How come I
Mhm.
don't drive a
Mhm.
Tesla? You know what I mean? Then you have to
Mhm.
explain to them. Parents probably
Mhm.
make a lot more money than us, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes they don't see that. They're just looking at the shiny things.
Mhm. So you've had the conversations with your kids about
Yeah.
comparisons, right? You feel like you've done a pretty good job with the tools you have and going into the depths of their understanding of the pitfalls of comparing yourself with others. You feel like you've,
Like I said, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I've tried my best as a parent.
Mhm. And
You
have they
know,
displayed like, oh my God, why are they better than me? Like, do you see them
not
displaying
better than
that?
me, not better than me,
Hmm.
but they, they'll once in a while to come up to me like, "Wow, did you see so and so?
Hmm.
These are people on YouTube.
Hmm.
Just bought a $10 million home."
Hmm.
It's like,
Hmm.
okay, just be thankful that they could afford a $10 million home, but
Hmm.
don't put all that pressure on
Hmm.
yourself to try to be like them,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Because what they do is different than we're, whatever whatever makes your soul smile is what you're going to go after,
Hmm.
and that may not afford you 20 cars in your garage.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
especially growing up as a kid
Yeah.
in today's world,
Yeah.
because it's so in your face.
Right. Yeah. And you feel like you and your wife have done a pretty good job of catching that when that happens.
Yeah. And I also know that I'm not going to
'Cause-
crush their dreams either. If they
right.
want to have 20 cars in a garage or buy mansions or things like that, then that's on them, right?
Does that happen often with the kids?
No, not often,
Yeah.
but it's enough to where I'm like, uh-oh, should
Hmm.
I have a talk
Hmm.
with them?
Hmm.
Because they're in high school. Once they
Hmm.
go to college, different story.
Hmm. Which is just to your point exactly is a story, right?
Yeah.
You don't know that for sure.
What's that?
You can speculate on what it is that they might experience, but that's only one experience, right?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I haven't been on a college campus lately, so I couldn't tell you what's going
Exactly.
on there. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Exactly, right? Like
yeah,
there's whatever's gonna that we think is gonna happen is just a story because there's just so many
yeah, yeah.
there's just so many variables and so many unknowns.
But I do know that when I drive past colleges, like there's a certain college out in my area,
Mhm.
I drive past that college, and sure enough, there are international students there driving freaking
Mhm.
Maseratis, and
Mhm.
I even saw a Countach, one of those $300,000 cars that I saw a college
Mm.
kid get into.
Mm. You
And I'm
notice
like,
that?
wow, they got a lot of money. That family
Yeah.
has a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And with all these reality TV shows
Yeah.
that are out there, like
Yeah.
I always like talk about the Kardashians, like
Yeah.
they're a different family.
Right.
You know what I mean? They come from privilege. Their father
Mhm.
was a
Mhm.
high profile
Mhm.
attorney, and
Mhm.
then they just became this high
Mhm.
profile reality TV family.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's like then they got paid off of
Mhm.
the show, and also
Mhm.
the products that now that they're
Mhm.
sharing with the world.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
someone don't even call it sharing, they're just pushing it down your throat, like
Right.
you should wear this so you can look like me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And sometimes
Mhm.
I got caught up in watching that, I admit it.
Mhm.
And then after a while I'm like, why the hell am I watching this?
Mhm.
It's like a glutton for punishment.
Right. Right.
It's like in
So
your face,
so
look how rich I am.
right. Right.
you know
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, if your kids are in this moment, they're fine, and you feel like you and your wife have done a good job of providing them guidance and information on what to be aware of. Then, is it really about them, or is it more about your projections?
Well, I would say
Because,
my projections are to try and not let them go down that rabbit hole.
right. So,
Unless they tell me this is what I want, and I'll help
sure.
them try to get
Yeah.
what they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
as a parent, it's
As a
like,
parent,
okay,
of course,
yeah,
you're going to be supportive in that sense.
yeah,
And in the conversation, what I'm noticing is a lot of you comparing yourself.
No.
Hmm.
I don't,
Hmm.
in my own personal development, in my own practice, I've
Mhm.
learned to just basically when I see something like that,
Mhm.
it's like just, that's
Mhm.
fine. They're blessed,
Sure.
because that they
Sure.
worked hard to get what they want.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm fine with that, right? I don't try to before, maybe when I was younger, I was comparing
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
and this is where my practice comes in. Like I've been able to keep that at bay, like that feeling at bay. Because sometimes
Mhm.
it comes up, I admit.
Mhm.
So, like for everybody else, you
Mhm.
may say one thing, like you're in this practice and you're like, oh, I could protect myself from everything. I
Mhm.
have no issues, no problem.
Mhm.
I'm a happy person. We
Mhm.
all know that people fall into like their unhappy spaces, their
Mhm.
depression, things
Mhm.
like that.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
I'm okay with seeing successful people
Sure.
because I got my own thing that I'm
Right.
doing, like you and I are doing,
I,
right?
right. I'm not saying that through your work you're not able to manage that kind of a feeling of that
Hmm.
comparison. But to your point, like you're saying, yeah, it still creeps up for you. And what I'm offering from a perspective is that you get to take a look at that at a deeper level because it's at this moment it's coming up for you because you're at a point where you're able to maybe see it from a different lens now of like, I've been doing this work on my comparison or being competitive. How can I peel back a different layer on that so that I get a deeper understanding and actually start to maybe embrace and move more into what it is that you're feeling. Because the other thing I hear too is that you're putting it at bay. So when you're putting something at bay, it's like what we talked about before. You're suggesting that you're sweeping it under the carpet and not necessarily dealing with it, and that's still there. So it comes up for you. It's maybe more hypersensitive for you because it's in regards to your kids. You want to make sure that they don't succumb to the comparisons, and it's also an invitation for you to take a look at deeper. Okay, where is this? Because there's fear for you. There's fear for you that for yourself, like, why is this resonating for me, or why is it still coming up for me, no matter how small of a degree it is. There, it just tells me that there's a little bit more of a opportunity to heal that and take a look at that a little bit more, and then just allowing yourself to see how that's being leaked or projected on into other areas of your life, in this case, with your kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're peeling back an onion. Maybe I don't want to hear about.
Exactly. Exact. And dude, and that is a huge insight for yourself, because
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like,
No. And I get what you're saying because and we've talked about this before. I'm
mm-hmm,
very competitive.
mm-hmm,
Like you put me in a sport, I'm gonna see where I could just crush you,
right,
even though
right.
I'm not that talented in that particular sport.
Mm-hmm,
I'm going to see if I could just try it
yes.
out and see if I could compete
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
competition kind of leaks into maybe the world of like business
Mm-hmm,
where I could sell a product, I can make
mm-hmm,
millions of dollars just
mm-hmm,
like you did.
mm-hmm,
It's just a competitive thing that I have. So
mm-hmm,
maybe that's where I don't want to keep that at bay because I
mm-hmm.
still feel that makes me
Well,
happy.
I mean,
You know what I mean?
there's keeping it at bay, and then there's also understanding it, getting a deeper understanding of it, because competitiveness in well, two things. Competitiveness is a comparison. That's one thing that
Yeah.
we get to
Yeah.
recognize, right? Competitiveness as well within a container. Again, we've talked about that
Yeah.
before. That's
It's
fine.
fine. Yeah.
And understanding the different layers of competitiveness and how it may leak into other areas of our lives, like that's the invitation for yourself to go down deeper, because that competition, you know, there's for anybody who's competitive, there was something that happened to them that caused them to be down that road to be super competitive, good or bad. But
Yeah.
it getting a deeper understanding of what that is, and maybe addressing some hurt or healing that needs to take place around that if that is present. But more importantly, just getting an understanding of that can help to inform how that shows up in other areas of your life, and how, make different choices now because you have that new information. Do I keep it in that container, or is this competitiveness applicable in this moment? Or even just asking, when I am competitive, is it at my expense or is it anybody else's expense? Is it in alignment with my, you know what I mean? So, it was a long line of questionings, and I wanted to make sure, like, what it is that the concern was. And the concern is making sure that your kids don't succumb to the comparisons that are placed upon us in social media or in society.
Yeah. Competing
And
with the Joneses, judging, all that stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
And my suggestion in approaching that is, if you're able to get deeper clarity and understanding, go down that rabbit hole of how it shows up for me, the comparisons, the competitiveness, that may give you more insight and better insight on how to better communicate that, even more so with your kids.
With my kids.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then in the meantime as well, like, all you can really do is just prepare for the now, be in the moment with your kids as far as that is concerned. And then you get to trust that the work that you, especially if you're doing the deeper work and having that insight and being able to share that information with your kids, then you get to trust in that process and not have to worry about what the future holds for them. Because if you're worried about what their future is going to look like, I mean, there's a certain degree where we worry, but and there's a certain degree when you worry where it becomes at your expense. But if you start going down the rabbit holes, like, I want to make sure that my kids don't compare themselves while they're in college and somebody's driving fucking Maserati, and my kid's going to start comparing. I want to make sure that she, like that, again, that's a story. You're thinking about the future. You're taking yourself out of the moment and being present with your child and having that conversation. So in other words, to be really effective in that communication with your child, be in the moment of it.
Yeah. And I do find myself being in the moment. And because she'll come up to me like, oh, did you know that YouTube influencer, he makes $30 million a year? I'm like, oh, that's good for him. You want to try that? No, I just like, and then she'll rattle off like what he's bought, what he's done. It's kind of like Logan Paul is out there, right?
Right.
He's making all kind of money on NFTs. And it's like, if that's great for him, right? I can honestly say that's great for him, because I have no interest in NFTs, just a little NFT, but not NFTs like he's doing or selling them or anything like that. Right. So I get that. Right. So I'm okay with that. Like all these guys who are making a lot of money on, they could do whatever they want, because that's not my wheelhouse. Right.
Right.
And we're focusing on, what we're doing. Right. Not on the podcast, but our own lives. Right. So that's kind of like where I'm at with that kind of stuff. Being able not to compare myself and not to, feel bad about my self-worth when I see that kind of stuff out there. You know what I mean? So
well, I think that's, and that's a great place to start building off of right now, building from, you know what I mean? You've done some work, and now you have some new information to maybe look at it from a different perspective and see and see like how that may shift your mindset on how you hold things, on how you hold competitiveness, how hold the conversation with your kids, right? Like, being able to have this different insight allows you, again, when you have new information, you're allowed to make new decisions. So I think it's something that you get to really go down a rabbit hole with and see what you can find there. But at least that gets you in a starting point, right?
Yeah. It may not even be a big deal. Like maybe I'm just, the fear again is kicking in.
It could be the fear.
I don't want them to be these people who are like showing off and look what I have, just like the YouTube guys that are on YouTube and like, look what I have. I got a 10-bedroom mansion in LA, and and sometimes it could play it could be negative sometimes for kids because they're comparing themselves. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean?
110%. And again, the best way to serve our kids is to have a better understanding how, our views on it, so
Yeah.
that we have a deeper clarity, and better understanding to communicate that to our kids.
And it's interesting. If one of my kids wants to be a superstar and
Mhm.
buy fancy stuff and big mansions, I'm okay
Mhm.
with it,
Sure.
because that's in their wheelhouse, right? That's
Sure.
that's what makes them smile, you know.
That's what can make them smile. And, again, I'll push back on it, as much as it is about your kids. It's an invitation for you to dive even deeper into what maybe those fears are for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In that conversation, what would be the biggest takeaway for you, for yourself, on that, as it
Reg-
relates to you?
Regarding seeing that kind of stuff on social media
Well, just biggest takeaway in the conversation. What stood out for you
with my kids.
with your kids, or maybe insight for yourself, or
Well, biggest thing is I hope they get it because
Mhm,
I know I have no control over them. I have no control over them, period, on what they think, say, or do.
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
I hope I
mhm,
have some effect on what I'm teaching them or what they see and they learn from me and my wife
mhm,
and family members, like how to be, how to be kind to people.
mhm,
Right. And then they're seeing like, just the world is crazy right now. Right.
mhm,
War and all this stuff. And at the same time, you have war in another part of the world, you have people showing off.
mhm, mhm,
Like
mhm,
what's the point?
mhm,
Right. You have someone dying in Ukraine, and yet this guy's showing off his 10-bedroom mansion. And, it is
mhm,
what it is, right? That's the world. That's
mhm.
the world we live in. Just trying to help them navigate through all of that craziness as a kid growing up today,
Sure,
you know,
absolutely.
because I
And
don't remember that when we were growing up. Like we've been through a couple of wars already. It's like, okay, people
Mhm,
fighting, we're in the war,
mhm,
but people are still living. They're still
mhm,
showing off, you know,
mhm.
all these things.
Right.
But now today you have social media where you could get that information in a split second. Just
Mhm,
boom,
mhm.
here it is.
As far as your views on social media, and again how it affects you and your communication with your with your children, does the information that, or the different perspectives, help you in approaching those types of conversations?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm talking to you right now. It's like maybe
Right.
there's something that I can learn by
Hmm.
talking to you that can enhance what I know
Hmm.
or replace what I know.
Hmm.
And through our discussion, you're telling me that maybe I need to look deeper. Maybe it is
Hmm.
that. Maybe I do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Once we get off this podcast, I'll find out if I need to go deeper with this conversation. But I know for myself, I am very competitive.
Hmm.
If I was a pro golfer and I saw Tiger Woods, I would want to beat him. I
Hmm.
would want the accolades that he got, the trophies, the
Hmm.
money,
Hmm.
all that. If I was a pro golfer, right?
Hmm.
That's where I lie in my competitiveness. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, if I really love golf, I'm gonna go try to compete.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, like, I would invite you to explore that competition, that competitiveness even more so. And that's another conversation that we could have. And just, I understand that you have an understanding of your competitiveness. And I think there's more layers for you to peel back on that. You might surprise yourself. I think when it comes to exploring our ways of being, and wanting to better ourselves, going down rabbit holes that have some sort of emotional signature to it, where it causes us, it's like an alarm. It's like, oh, there's something there might be something here for me to take a look at. That it's always worth it to venture down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole, because then it's addressed, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
addressed, and then you can put it away or let go of it, depending on what it is that
Mhm.
you're working through. But at least know that it's not as big of a lump as it was before.
Yeah. Yeah. Something
So
I'm actually dealing with.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
In the
yeah.
moment.